in its current version, is this even a legal, organization? Does it
Does it meet statute?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Can you have sort of a quasi, these things you have to come to us, and these things you can do on your own? Can you spend, for instance, Laura, can you spend money on activities that, aren't budgeted by council? Is that, there's some pretty big, meaty issues here
that we haven't even got to yet, because you're not allowing us to go through this in an orderly fashion, Larry. You're just not.
Well, you brought up the economic development, which
I know, and I think
you started it.
Actually, what I'm going to tell you is that Council President suggested a way to go through this. It sounded like a good idea to me. That happened to be the first one that was listed. Now I'm trying to work my way through this, and I'd like your help with it if I can, so that we can, because if we don't focus in some kind of manner and take this on in some kind of orderly fashion, we're going to be here all night and we're not going to get anything accomplished.
I get that, but don't you think we should be asking our city administrator if economic development is even a legal responsibility of a board in the way we set it up? Do you have any input on that, Cheryl?
On whether or not economic development is, well, the council has adopted an ordinance that provides opportunities for economic development to the board.
But we have our own economic development policy. Is our economic development policy, which supersedes certainly this, does it include the ability for outside for divisions of the city to offer economic development incentives? Which one supersedes?
No, you have a conflict in the ordinance. You have a conflict in the ordinance because in one section of the ordinance it requires council to approve certain things. In another section of the ordinance, you give exclusive jurisdiction or authority. So there is a conflict in the ordinance.
Which is part of the reason that, and I've been saying that we needed to look at the ordinance for over a year, specifically because of that. I liked Christie's idea when she said it. My idea initially was going to be a different way to go about it. But at this point, I think that economic development, nobody's wanting to give, going forward, carte blanche to any board or commission of the city economic development power, so that they can work in possibly a cross purpose to what the city's desire is as far as economic development.
True, but
Mayor, we have.
May I make 2 points, and then I'll step back and let you all continue. First of all, our mission in our charter is to work on behalf of our ratepayers, who are the citizens of this city. One of the ways that we work to stabilize rates for our ratepayers is to bring in new customers. Our wholesale rates will go up in the future. The only way to protect our ratepayers from that is to build the customer base. So we have a vested interest for each of our ratepayers to build our customer base. So that's one. Second comment I would make regarding economic development, as mentioned previously, we certainly compete with KCP&L for customers. They have very aggressive economic development policy. If we do not, it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. So that's what we're looking for. We're not looking to do anything that's not in the best interest of the city. We want to be in lockstep with you. But lacking direction, we've got to move forward and get out there and compete on that playing field with KCP&L. That's our only interest.
I know, and I think you understand that we're looking towards getting a vision and getting it moving forward in an expedited manner.
Mayor Morrow, with all consideration here, I'd like to look at the second item here, and I would almost roll this into the first with regard to expansion of service area.
Sure.
That's really kind of going into economic development, and expansion of service area, again, is a strategic direction, a strategic decision, and I think we had discussed that before. But it really does tie back into economic development, so I would almost say these two need to be considered together.
So, can I get an answer? Cheryl was going to say something, and then we yielded the floor to the board member, board president. So did you?
I'm sorry, can you go back and revisit the, so quick?
The question?
Yes.
Well, can you have, I mean, the city, as I understand it, has an economic development policy, right? And, I mean, that is.
Abatement policy. Yes, you have an abatement policy, yes.
Is it
You have an
not-
abatement policy.
it's not called economic development?
You have an abatement policy, which kind of talks about, I guess, how you would, how you would stimulate or encourage economic development.
But we did also have money put in the budget for an economic development strategy
Yes.
to be devised, and that's coming. But right now, you just have an abatement.
Okay.
So your question?
Well, I guess my question still goes back to, in the format that the board, how it's been created, is it a legal entity within the city? Should it have a little more structure and due diligence? And it looks like Jim might have some comments on that.
It's not a separate legal entity. The city is the legal entity, but you've chosen to give them certain authority over certain parts of the city's activities, except for things that are exclusively under the jurisdiction of a council, like eminent domain. So what's currently in place is certainly, in my mind, legal.
2296 made it all legal. The council made it legal by adopting the resolution back then.
But does it conform to state statute with regard to public utility boards or electric boards?
This
No.
is not a separate entity like Kansas City, Kansas is.
Correct. It's kind of quasi.
You know, we used to have committees for sewer, water, and electric, and we had a chairman for each one, and we somewhat similar, but in this case, you went through a tremendous debate about whether to sell this utility or not sell it. You decided not to sell it, and it was decided that we should have a separate organization running it like a business.
Sure.
Everybody did the best they could to draft this ordinance for the first shot at it. And I think it was a pretty good draft to start with. It may need some tweaking now and then. If you want council's approval on some of these things, just indicate that to the staff. They'll come back, redraft the ordinance and present it to you. But you're going to spend till, sun comes up with the kind of debate you're going through here tonight. You just need to give some direction to the staff on your general feelings. We know how Larry feels. He'd like to do away with it, but Larry's not the majority. The rest of you need to give your input and move this thing along, or you're just going to debate
Thank you,
this thing all
Jim.
night long.
I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Jim. No,
I think we're.
I think that a couple of people have said advise and consent on economic development. I think that extension of service in anticipation falls into that. I would probably agree with Steve on that.
I think so.
I agree.
Okay. So yeah, I think our direction to city staff is we need to figure out a way to change the language in the policy about economic development and expansion of electric service.
To align with
To-
strategic goals, or?
to-
No, I mean, I think it's as
Two.
simple as the board may also develop and recommend economic development incentives to council for approval.
Okay.
With council approved.
May develop and
Yeah.
recommend to council for approval. Thank you.
As well as on the expansion of electric service.
Okay.
And I think that expansion of electric service, I think that I will take Board President Schultz's thoughts on that directly into consideration. I think that when you're competing with a